I'd like to call the hearing to order. I'd like to welcome our witnesses today, Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates. Dan, it's good to see our former colleague here. Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Mike Pompeo. Good to see you, Mike. Director of Defense Intelligence, General Vince Stewart. Director of National Security Agency, Admiral Mike Rogers. Director of Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Robert Cardella. And Acting Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Andrew McCabe. I thank all of you for being here this morning, especially to you, Director McCabe, for filling in on such short notice. Since 1995, this committee has met in an open forum to hear about and discuss the security threats facing the United States of America. I understand that many people tuned in today are hopeful will focus solely on the Russian investigation of their involvement in our elections. Let me disappoint everybody up front. While the committee certainly views Russian intervention in our elections as a significant threat, the purpose of today's hearing is to review and highlight to the extent possible the ranges of threats that we face as a nation. The national
cycle. Last question, very briefly, Admiral Rogers. Do you have any doubt that the Russians were behind the intervention in the French elections?
Let me phrase it this way: we are aware of some Russian activity directed against the French election process. As I previously said before Congress earlier this week, we in fact reached out to our French counterparts to say we have become aware of this activity. We want to make you aware. What are you seeing? I'm not in a position to have looked at the breadth of the French infrastructure, so I'm not really in a position to make a whole simple declaratory statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rubio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCabe, can you, without going to the specific of any individual investigation, I think the American people want to know, has the dismissal of Mr. Comey in any way impeded, interrupted, stopped, or negatively impacted any of the work, any investigation, or any ongoing projects at the Federal Bureau of Investigations?
As you know, Senator, the work of the men and women of the FBI continues despite any changes in circumstance, any decisions. So there has been no effort to impede our investigation to date. Quite simply put, sir, you cannot stop the men and women of the FBI from doing the right thing, protecting the American people, and upholding the Constitution.
And this is for all the members of the committee, as has been widely reported, and people know this. Kaspersky Lab software is used by not hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans. To each of our witnesses, I would just ask, would any of you be comfortable with the Kaspersky Lab software on your computers?
A resounding no for me.
No.
No, Senator.
No, sir.
No, Senator. No, sir.
On the Director Pompeo, on the Venezuela, which was mentioned in Director Coates' statements, as all of you are probably well aware, armed civilian groups or colectivos, these militias in the street, have been armed by the regime for purposes of defending, for lack of a better term, the regime from protesters. We all are aware of the Maduro regime's cozy relationship with Hezbollah, with the FARC, which is a designated terrorist organization, and links to narco-trafficking. Among the weapons in the stockpile, the military in Venezuela are Igla-S, these basically Russian variant of our Stinger missiles. Director Pompeo, if you could comment on the risk that I believe exists that as these groups become more desperate, potentially even operate at some point outside the control of the Maduro regime, they're running around in the streets also in search of money and food and anything else that they want to get their hands on, the threat of any advanced weaponry, such as what I've just mentioned, being sold or transferred to the FARC, a terrorist organization, sold to drug cartels in Mexico potentially, or even sold to terrorist organizations on the black market. Is that a real threat? Is that something we should be cognizant of?
Senator, it is a real threat. As we have all seen, the situation in Venezuela continues to deteriorate. Maduro gets more desperate by the hour. The risk of these colectivos acting in a way that is not under his control increases as time goes on as well. In classified setting, I'm happy to share with you a little bit more about the details of what we know. We have not seen any of those major arms transfers take place. We don't have any evidence that those have taken place to date, but those stockpiles exist not only in the Maduro regime, but other places as well. There are plenty of weapons running around in Venezuela, and this risk is incredibly real and serious, and ultimately a threat to South America and Central America, in addition to just in Venezuela.
Staying in the Western Hemisphere for a moment, and this potentially is also to the Director McCabe, it's only to you, Director Pompeo. I continue to be concerned about the potential, and what I believe is the reality of a concerted effort on the part of the Cuban government to wittingly enlist Americans, business executives, and others, even local and state political leaders, in an effort to have them influence U.S. policymaking on Cuba, and particularly the lifting of the embargo. Would this be a tactic consistent with what we have seen in the past from other nation states, including the regime in Cuba?
I'll let Mr. McCabe make a comment as well, but yes, of course. Frankly, this is consistent with what we right. This is the attempt to interfere in the United States is not limited to Russia. The Cubans have deep ties. It is in their deepest tradition to take American visitors and do their best to influence them in the way that is adverse to U.S. interests.
Yes, sir. Fully agree. We share your concerns about that issue.
And my final question is, on all this focus on Russia and what's happened in the past, is it the opinion of all of you, or those of you certainly all have insight on this, that even as we focus on 2016 and the efforts leading up to that election, efforts to influence policymaking here in the United States vis-a-vis the Russian interests are ongoing, that the Russians continue to use active measures, even at this moment, even on this day, to try to, through the use of multiple different ways, to influence the political debate and the decisions made in American politics, particularly as they pertain to Russia's interests around the world. In essence, these active measures is an ongoing threat, not simply something that happened in the past.
Yes, sir, that's right.
Senator, it's right. In some sense, though, we ought to put in context. This has been going on for a long time. There's nothing new. Only the cost has been lessened, the cost of doing it.
I would just add that the use of cyber and social media significantly increased the impact and the capabilities that Russia. Obviously, this has been done for years and years, even decades. But the ability they have to use the interconnectedness and all that provides that didn't provide before, they've literally upped their game to the point where it's having a significant impact.
From my perspective, I would just highlight cyber is enabling them to access information in massive quantities that weren't quite attainable to the same level previously. And that's just another tool in their attempt to acquire information, misuse of that information, manipulation, outright lies, inaccuracies at times, but in other times actually dumping raw data, which is, as we also saw during this last presidential election cycle for us.
Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Where there's obviously more than one threat to our country, I would argue that the greatest danger to the United States is North Korea. And I'm one of those who have been very worried and trying to follow this as close as possible. In the statement, for the record, you state, and I quote, North Korea's nuclear weapons and missile programs will continue to pose a serious threat to U.S. interests and to the security environment in East Asia in 2017. You go on to state Pyongyang is committed to developing a long-range nuclear-armed missile that is capable of posing a direct threat to the United States. These assessments, combined with North Korea's behavior, recent ballistic missile launches, and proximity to U.S. forces and allies in Asia, is deeply concerning. For the purpose of this open hearing, could each of you express the threat posed by North Korea in this public setting, and then address, most importantly, some of the specific actions we're taking as a nation? And some of it you may want to do in the closed hearing later.
I think we could get into greater detail in the closed hearing, but it's clear that we have assessed this as a very significant, potentially existential threat to the United States that has to be addressed. You're aware there's been considerable discussion among the policymakers with our providing intelligence with the administration relative to steps moving forward. General Mattis has taken a major role in this, as well as our Secretary of State and others. The interaction with the Chinese of late, we think it can play a significant role in terms of how we deal with this. We have dedicated a very significant amount of our intelligence resources to the issue of North Korea, and I think we'd look forward to going deeper into all of that.
Let me ask this.
Classified session.
Is it possible in this hearing to estimate when they will have an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of taking a nuclear warhead?
I think it would be best if we save that for those kind of details for the closed session.
Can you say in this session how effective China has been in stopping some of the testing?
Senator Feinstein, let me try and answer that as best I can. I actually just returned from Korea. I was there last week. I had a chance to be with our great soldiers, General Brooks and his team, as well as the great soldiers of the Republic of Korea Army who are on the front lines there. They're doing amazing work in a difficult condition. With respect to the Chinese, they have made efforts in a way that they have not made before in an effort to close down the trade that they have and putting pressure, diplomatic pressure as well, on the North Koreans. The intelligence would suggest that we're going to need more to shake free this terribly challenging problem, and that they could do more, and they have the capacity to do more as well.
Could you be specific? It's have they entirely stopped coal? To what degree have they reduced it?